What makes a book so powerful that its author, right at the peak of worldwide fame, just vanishes? That's what we're digging into today. We're looking at the mystery of The Catcher in the Rye and the even bigger mystery of its creator, J.D. Salinger.
Okay, to really get this book's dark legacy, we have to start right here. Picture this, it's 1980. After murdering John Lennon, Mark David Chapman doesn't try to escape. No, he just sits down on the curb, pulls out a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, and starts reading. Just calmly reading until the police show up. I mean, that one single horrific event really cemented this novel's place in cultural infamy.
And here's the crazy part. Chapman wasn't some isolated case. For some reason, this book, the one so many of us had to read in high school, it just keeps popping up in the hands of really troubled people. It's way more than just a novel at this point. It's become this cultural symbol, almost like a dark talisman for people who feel dangerously cut off from the world.
Yeah, the book's shadow is long. A copy was apparently found with Lee Harvey Oswald after the JFK assassination. It was even the key obsession for Mel Gibson's character in that movie Conspiracy Theory. And on top of all that, for decades it's been one of the most banned books in American schools, constantly being pulled from library shelves. So you have to ask yourself, what is it about this story that pushes all these buttons?
All right, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to meet the guy at the center of it all, the book's unforgettable protagonist, Holden Caulfield. You really can't understand the book without understanding him.
So, on the surface, the plot seems pretty simple, right? Holden's this cynical teenager. He gets kicked out of another fancy prep school, but instead of going home to face the music, he just takes off. He dives into this wild couple-of-day journey all alone in New York City. And the whole thing is really just fueled by his loneliness and this absolute rage at what he calls the phony adult world.
And that title, The Catcher in the Rye, it sounds so mysterious, right? Well, it actually comes from this image that Holden makes up in his head. He gets a line from a poem wrong, and he pictures this big field of rye right on the edge of a cliff. And in this field, all these kids are playing. His dream job, the only thing he really wants to be, is the catcher, the guy who stands there and saves the kids before they can fall off the cliff into the whole messy world of being an adult.
And this quote, this is really the heart of the whole novel. It shows you that underneath all that cynicism and complaining, Holden is actually a desperate idealist. He's not just some angry kid rebelling. He wants to be a protector of innocence. He wants to save his little sister, and maybe whatever's left of his own innocence from that phony world he hates so much.
So, okay, Holden Caulfield is a puzzle for sure. But the guy who created him, J.D. Salinger, well, he's an even bigger enigma. And this is where it gets really wild. Because the author's own life started to copy his characters, but on a way, way bigger scale.
I mean, the parallels between them are just incredible. Like Holden, Salinger got kicked out of prep school. Holden hated the phony world around him, right? Well, Salinger came to believe that fame itself was the ultimate phony world. So he did what Holden could only dream about. He actually escaped completely.
And this timeline really shows you just how radical his disappearance was. So 1951, the book comes out, makes him a massive star. Now you'd think he'd ride that wave, right? Nope. Salinger does the exact opposite. Just 2 years later, he's gone, flees New York, moves to some remote little town. Then by 1965, he just stops publishing. Period. For the next 45 years until he died, he lived in almost total seclusion. He was literally tearing down the fame that most people spend their entire lives chasing.
So that brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? Why would somebody at the absolute height of success just choose to become a ghost? And the answer isn't just, oh, he wanted some privacy. No, it was a whole philosophy he had about how poisonous fame really is. Basically, Salinger came to believe that fame just destroys things. He thought that as soon as you become a famous name, people can't see the real you anymore. They're just interacting with an image, a brand, not a human being. And for him, that meant any kind of real, authentic connection was just impossible. And it got worse. He felt like fame forces you to live your life as a performance. You start doing things just to meet the expectations of this huge, invisible audience. It's like your life isn't yours anymore. It's a script written by everyone else. For a guy like Salinger who cared about authenticity more than anything, that was basically a death sentence for the soul.
And look, this wasn't just some abstract idea he had. He waged a full-on war against his own fame. He wouldn't let them put his photo on his book jackets. He refused to let anyone make a movie out of his work. He turned down everybody. We're talking Marlon Brando, Steven Spielberg. He even sued a writer to stop an unauthorized sequel from coming out. He was doing everything he could to just erase himself from the public eye.
So what you end up with is this
perfect storm, right? You've got this super controversial, rebellious book, and it's written by this author who's a complete mystery. And the irony of it all, the more he tried to disappear, the bigger his legend became.
Yeah, his disappearance didn't kill the book. It turned into a legend. I mean, get this. We're more than 70 years after it was first published, and The Catcher in the Rye still sells over 250,000 copies every single year. And that's just in the United States.
And this isn't just an American thing. Not by a long shot. Those themes of feeling alienated, of searching for something real, of pushing back against a phony world, that stuff resonates everywhere. For instance, for the last 10 years, it's been the #2 best-selling foreign book in South Korea. Its power just crosses borders and generations like it's nothing.
So it leaves us with this really fascinating question, especially for today. In our world, a world of social media, of personal branding, where there's this constant pressure to be seen, to be liked, was J.D. Salinger's choice to just vanish the ultimate rebellion? Maybe the most powerful statement he ever made wasn't something he wrote down, but something he lived, his quiet, total, deliberate absence from it all.
Ah, The Catcher in the Rye. You've probably heard of it, right? It's one of those books. For decades, it's been the go-to story for teenage rebellion. But if you look past all the cynicism and angst, it's really this incredibly moving story about a kid who's lost, totally adrift, and just trying to figure out how to live in a world he can't stand. So let's get into it and figure out why this story just refuses to fade away.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? Why are we still talking about Holden Caulfield? I mean, what is it about this confused, lonely teenager from way back in the 50s that still hits so hard for so many people today?
All right, so let's meet our guy. Holden Caulfield is 16, and he's just managed to get himself kicked out of yet another fancy prep school. But instead of heading home and facing the music, he decides, you know what, I'm just going to vanish into New York City for a couple of days. His main beef with the world? It is absolutely full of what he calls phonies, people who are fake, insincere, just going through the motions.
And that one decision basically kicks off this whole wild journey. Suddenly, he's totally on his own in the middle of New York City, and all he's really looking for is one single, genuine human connection. He's got a little bit of money in his pocket, so he checks into this pretty crummy hotel, thinking he can just hide out until his parents find out he's been expelled. But the freedom he thought he'd find in the city, yeah, that's not what's waiting for him. What he finds instead is this deep, crushing loneliness. And man, his attempts to connect with anyone in the adult world are a total disaster right from the start. He actually hires a prostitute, but then he just feels bad for her, and all he wants to do is talk. This, of course, leads to him getting into a fight with her pimp over $5, and he gets beaten up for it. Seriously, every single person he meets just makes him feel more and more alone. Okay, so after getting knocked around a bit, literally and figuratively, Holden's whole mission kind of shifts. He's not just hiding anymore. Now he's on a desperate, almost frantic search for something real, for someone authentic in a world that just feels so completely fake.
You really have to understand how Holden sees things. For him, it is completely black and white. On one side, you've got the phony world, all small talk and people trying to impress each other. But on the other side, there's the real world. That's where you find things that are pure and innocent, like his little sister Phoebe, or the memory of his younger brother Allie, who died. He still carries Allie's old baseball mitt with him everywhere. A lot of his anger, it's really just grief in disguise.
And you can see this desperate search play out all day long. In the morning, he has this really sweet, simple chat with two nuns. And for a minute, he feels that spark of connection. But then, just a few hours later, he's on a date with an old girlfriend that ends with him calling her a pain in the ass. Later that night, he tries to get some life advice from an older acquaintance over drinks. And that just turns into this super awkward, empty conversation. It feels like every single time, the phony world wins. All of this failure, all this disappointment, it's all building towards the most important moment in the entire book. He feels completely alone, totally out of options, and so he turns to the one person in the world he knows won't let him down. So what does he do? He sneaks back into his own apartment late at night when his parents are out. He's there to see his 10-year-old sister, Phoebe. She's his last resort. You know, she's his one true anchor in this whole phony mess. And as Holden is going on about how much he hates his school and how terrible everything is, Phoebe, well, she just cuts right through all of it. She sees that he's against everything, so she hits him with this simple but totally devastating question. And it forces him, for maybe the first time ever, to think about what he actually wants to be, not just what he hates. And his answer, well, it's the title of the book. He tells her about this dream he has. He pictures this giant field of rye on the edge of a cliff, and there are thousands of little kids playing in it, and there are no grown-ups anywhere except for him. And his job is to stand there and catch any of the kids if they get too close to the edge. He wants to save them from falling into the phony world of adults. Yeah, that's his one true calling. He doesn't want to be a lawyer or some other kind of phony professional. No, he just wants to be a protector. He wants to be a guardian, standing between innocent kids and the complicated, painful world that already took his brother away from him. And then comes this moment that it hits you right in the gut. Phoebe gets it. She understands his pain in a way that no adult has, and she gives him all of her Christmas money, every last cent. It's this act of pure, selfless love. It's the one truly real human connection he's been looking for this whole time, and it completely breaks him. But that incredible moment doesn't just magically fix everything. In fact, Holden's journey isn't over. This moment with Phoebe actually sends him into one last chaotic spiral that leads to a really profound and honestly pretty painful realization. He tries to get some help from a favorite old teacher, but he wakes up in the middle of the night, feels the guy patting his head, and freaks out, running away in a panic. Then, as he's wandering around, he sees some horrible graffiti carved into a wall at Phoebe's school, and he's just filled with this helpless rage. He tries to rub it off, but he can't. And that's when it hits him. He can't erase all the ugliness. His mission is impossible. So he's totally defeated. He's hit rock bottom. And what's his grand finale escape plan? He's going to hitchhike out west, live in a cabin, and pretend to be a deaf mute so he never has to have a phony conversation with anyone ever again. It's the ultimate fantasy of just disappearing. He sends a little note to Phoebe to meet him so he can say goodbye, but here's the kicker. When she shows up, she's not just there to see him off. Nope, she's got her suitcase packed, she's coming with him. And seeing her there, ready to throw her life away for him, that's the wake-up call he desperately needed. He can't drag her down with him. So he scraps the plan. And instead of running away, he takes her to the carousel in Central Park. And as he stands there in the pouring rain, just watching her go around and around, something inside of him finally shifts. That despair starts to melt away and turn into this really tough but really necessary acceptance. You know how on those old carousels, there's that little gold ring you can try to grab for a prize? It's a risk. You could lean out too far, you could fall. And as Holden watches Phoebe reach for it, it all just clicks. He finally gets it. He can't be the catcher in the rye. He can't stop kids from taking risks, and he can't protect them from every single fall. This quote just sums it up perfectly. It's this huge shift from wanting to freeze time and stop the world to accepting that you have to let it turn. You have to let people live, even if it's risky. It's a painful lesson, but it's a huge part of growing up. So, the whole time we've been listening to this story, where has Holden been telling it from? Well, it turns out the entire novel is him looking back on all of this from a hospital or treatment center out in California where he's recovering from a complete breakdown. He's been trying to make sense of his own fall. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Holden's story treats being a teenager not just as some awkward phase, but as a real crisis of grief and identity. So is that painful, confusing, messy journey of finding yourself something that needs to be treated or fixed? Or is it an essential, unavoidable part of becoming a person, a necessary fall we all have to take?